Good day, fellow deal makers. Welcome to the Deal Scout. This is such a fun show because all day long we talk about deals with deal makers, deals gone wild, deals like that fall apart. And, the purpose and mission of this show is to put deals and deal makers together. I'm a scout, so I hunt for deals. So with that, I wanted to have a conversation about the retail side of commercial real estate. So I went to my network and I said, hey, who could talk about this? And we found a guy, Raphael. And you're going to have to say your last name because I can't do it. But Raphael, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, man. How's it going? Yeah, my last name's Collazo. So in Spanish, the double L is a ya sound. So that's how you say it.
Collazo.
Collazo. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. That's a cool name, man. Raphael Collazo.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah. No, it's the only one I have. So I gotta kind of work with it.
You're stuck with it. Let's make the best of it, right? Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you guys located?
Yeah, so we are currently located in Louisville, Kentucky. So it's on the fringe. It's on the if for those of you guys who know geographically, it's along the Ohio River. So Louisville's on one side, and then Indiana, Southern Indiana, is on the other side. So, yeah, it's a great little city. I've been here for about 5 years now. So it's been a great ride so far.
Super cool. And what do you do like on a daily basis? Like, what's your focus in business?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I've been in the brokerage space since mid-2019. I joined a boutique brokerage. So we do work on a little bit of everything, and that's what I essentially started out doing. I did office deals. I did multifamily deals. I've done industrial deals. I've done, retail, all types of retail deals. And, over time, I started kind of gravitating more towards the retail end. And our brokerage does do quite a bit of retail, and our broker in particular, that's kind of where his background's from. He owned restaurants in the past. And so, he's very familiar with, what to look out for these types of opportunities. And so that I find myself naturally gravitating towards that. I still work on a variety of other deals as well, but I would say my focal point, let's say 60 to maybe 70% of what I do has been kind of gravitating more towards the retail side.
Yeah, copy that. So how'd you get into commercial real estate and becoming a deal maker on this side of the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm actually an engineer by trade. So I studied industrial engineering and minored in economics at Arizona State University. And then I got into the software consulting space. So I was a software developer and consultant for a company that implemented software systems for government agencies around the country and abroad. So I lived in Washington, D.C. I lived in Puerto Rico for a couple of years on a big tax software project. And then when Hurricane Maria hit, the project got put temporarily on hold, and I was moved to Louisville, Kentucky to help with the project to replace the financial software system for the city. And what was a temporary relocation became more permanent when my project manager wanted to keep me around. And right around mid 2019, I transitioned away from what I was doing before and jumped into the brokerage side. Obviously it's, I get asked a lot why I did that, especially coming from a pretty lucrative career of software. And a big reason for it is the transitory nature of what I was doing before. I was moving every other year, and it just wasn't sustainable if you wanted to build something of significance. And so I've always kind of been somewhat entrepreneurial. I had a catering company in college, and a year out of college, I got accepted into an incubator in Phoenix, where I tried to grow a restaurant. Essentially, that's what I thought I wanted to do. Learned relatively quickly that was not what I wanted to do long term. And, ultimately I got the opportunity as an engineer. But, again, the reason I got into brokerage is my mom's a residential agent in Arizona, just done very well. And she originally encouraged me to go the residential route, but I just couldn't deal with the emotions involved in the home purchase process. And I felt like my personality and my skill set was best suited for, a commercial role where you're dealing a lot more in the business side of things. So
I found the same thing. Is I started out in construction, but then I got my real estate license, and they're like, all right, listings. So I went after all these listings, and I was like, oh man, like I really don't work well with homeowners, and the general public. I work really well with investors, and that's when I started moving over to only working with investors on the commercial side. But I think it's so important for us as deal makers to know who we are, to have that emotional intelligence, to know who we are, to find the best fit in the kind of deals. How did you discover that about you to land you into this role?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I've done deals in all different property types. So I've done office deals, I've done multifamily deals, I've done, retail and industrial deals. And you know, having gone through the experience of doing these, I realized a few things about myself. One being on the multifamily end, it is a lot like a residential property, especially if you're talking about, you know, small mom and pop operators. You know, typically if you know someone who owns an aplex that is selling it because they want to retire, that's like their investment from when they were, you know, for their entire career. And so their emotional attachment sometimes can get involved, and it can be somewhat of a challenging process to kind of get them over the hump when it comes to, you know, getting the deal squared away. Along with that, the due diligence process of multifamily, you're going into people's homes and coordinating all that can be kind of a pain. And, you know, tenants asking questions, you have to be discreet about everything. So it you know, having done that, several of these over the last couple of years, like I realized that although if an opportunity presents itself, I'll execute on the deal, and I've executed well on those deals. It's not a deal that I love or enjoy. And so on the retail side, I love learning about businesses. So I've dealt with people who own like rug cleaning businesses. I've dealt with people who own restaurants. I've dealt with people who own, you know, liquor stores, convenience stores. So you get to learn the nuances of these different types of businesses and know how each operate and how the space can help or detract from their success. And so that's one of the reasons I was most attracted to the retail side, is because you can literally work with hundreds of different types of businesses, and you get to learn about the nuances of each. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of my thing.
Absolutely, man. Now, you mentioned something that also is true with me, and I've interviewed maybe 1,000 entrepreneurs over the years of doing this, and something that stands out to me is, you know, you were being a engineer and in the software world, you were transient by nature. My daughter's 9 and she's lived in like 8 different homes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until like I looked at the things that I'm building for my family, and I said, if I want to build something, like you said, something of significance, I have to dig in and build, right? And that was the same for me. It might not be for everybody, but what was the turning point that made you think that way?
Yeah. So, and I'll give you a little bit of background on myself as well. I was actually born in Northeast Italy. So my dad he was in the Air Force. He met my mom he was stationed at Aviano Air Base. So he had myself and my twin brother. I have a fraternal twin. And so I lived in Italy till I was 5. Then we moved to Germany, and I was there for several years. And then I moved to Belgium, and I was there for 5 years. So, and then I moved to Arizona. So I've only ever been in one place, no more than 5 years. So it's been hopping around over and over and over and over again. And there's some pros and cons to each, obviously. The pros are that you become very adaptable. Like you can put me in any location around the world or even, you know, in around the United States, and I can adapt, and I could find a way to build the network. I can find a way to be able to, you know, make something of whatever situation I'm in. But to that point, it becomes a lot harder to build a deep network. So you could build an expansive network, but the deep network comes from consistent repetition, where you see people on a regular basis and get engaged with them all consistently over time. And so, you know, that's what was lacking when I was traveling so much and moving every other year, right? Because when you do move away from a location, as much as you say you want to keep in contact and whatever else, life just happens, and it's very hard to be able to maintain those connections at a distance. Whereas when you are physically somewhere, it's a lot easier to be able to say, hey, let's go grab lunch. Hey, let's go grab coffee. Hey, let's meet to go over this deal. So granted, it's become a lot more prevalent now with Zoom and everything to be able to connect with people just all across the nation. But I don't think you can replace that physical interaction when it comes to building those strong, lasting relationships.
Yeah, I am so aligned with you. I feel that true. You know, I walk my kids to school. I see the same people, the same crossing guards. I go to the same coffee shops. We start to know each other's name. And I think that's important to build a deep network. And I love how you kind of compare and contrast expansive, right? Like you know people in Italy and you know people in all these other places that you lived, versus a deep network of let's go deep together versus expansive. Now, how has that impacted your business and building something of significance, that choice?
That choice. Yeah, no, I mean, it's the difference between not having a business and having a business, in my opinion, especially when you talk about commercial real estate, because you deal with the same people, you know. In residential real estate, there may be 10,000 agents in a market, or in the commercial realm, it's like, at least in our market, and obviously we're unique because we're Louisville, and it may be different in Phoenix, it may be different than San Francisco, it may be different in New York City. But even then, like, I would say that the ratios hold true. You maybe have in our market maybe 200 to 300 people who are commercial agents, and the ones who are really transacting are probably in the 80 to 100 range. So you run into the same people over and over and over and over and over again. And so, being able to, engross yourself in that environment, in my opinion, has been, game changing for me. So that's just one example. As far as the other parts are concerned, in Louisville, it's somewhat of a unique city in that it's very not necessarily cliquey, but it's very hard to break the shell. Like, one of the first things that people often say that are transplants that move here, when they ask you where you went to school, it's not your college, it's where do you go to high school. Like, there are factions of high schools and everything else, and based on where you went to high school, that says something about you as an individual. And so it's kind of interesting. It's a very interesting dynamic that's very unique to Louisville that I didn't see in Phoenix, that I didn't see in DC, that I didn't see in other parts of the country. And so, being able to break into that, establishment, as they say, requires you to become like a known commodity. And that obviously takes some time. You can't do it over time. You can't do it overnight. So that's kind of, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my observation.
And to do that, this is what I see on your LinkedIn. Commercial real estate meetup group coordinator, YouTube host, co-host of a podcast show, and then other groups and things, author of a book. So you said to break into a network, you have to be known. Those are some of the things you did. This is an opportunity to kind of give a shout out for some of the things that you're working on. Give a shout out to your podcast and to your books and some of the other stuff you're working on.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. Yeah. So I started a podcast similar to you about a year and a half ago with a buddy of mine who's a business partner as well. He owns a commercial construction company here in town. It's called the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast. And we interview commercial, professionals from a variety of different professions. We've had lawyers, we've had construction company owners, developers, brokers, bankers, lawyers, you name it, but really focused on the commercial real estate industry. And we talk about a variety of different subjects to enlighten people about the commercial real estate industry. So that's kind of the podcast itself. The books that I've written 6, but 2 of which are commercial real estate focused. One, which was released last year, is called Before You Sign That Lease, The Small Business Owner's Guide to Leasing Commercial Space. And the one I've just released actually a week and a half ago was Before You Buy That Building, The Small Business Owner's Guide to Buying Commercial Real Estate. And that's going to be a series of commercial real estate books. The next one's going to be Before You Sell That Building. The next one after that's going to be Before You Develop That Building. And then the final one is going to be Before You Invest in That Building, which is like the limited partners guide to vetting sponsors. So it's going to be, go ahead.
These books are already written and you're just
not yet. Well, okay. That's the vision of the next book, which is Before You Sell That Building. I'm about 70% complete on that one. And then as we start getting more into the development side, I'm going to have lessons learned from those experiences, and I'm going to apply that to writing Before You Develop That Building. And then, as we start raising money, which is what we're going to have to do some of these deals, Before You Invest in That Building is going to be like a book on how to vet sponsors. So
nice. And you've already written 6. Did I hear that right? What
Mm-hmm.
are the other ones about?
So they were called the Millennial Playbook series. It was personal and professional development topics for young professionals. And I started writing those, and when I was doing what I was doing before in the software space, I had a blog, and then took some of the articles that I wrote in the blog. That was my first book. And then from there, I just got into the habit of writing and, wrote several other books after that.
Please give me some advice. I'm in the process of writing my first book, and it's literally been years, and I'm struggling. Give me some advice, and for other deal makers who know that they need to write a book too, about their journey and about life and the things that they're learning. Because I think as we share our knowledge, we actually become better deal makers. So give me some advice on how do I get my first book out of here.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think a starting point that was the hardest for me is that, the overcoming the imposter syndrome, because a lot of times, especially, I mean, I'm relatively early in my career, there's people that have a lot more gray hair than I do that haven't written a book. And so a lot of times, the idea of who am I to write something like this is something that everyone deals with. I've dealt with it. Every time I release a book, I continually have this thought process, but understanding that the target audience that you're broaching if you have more knowledge about the process than they do, then you're adding value, right? So like I've been in the business for 3 years now. I've done several deals over the course of my 3-year career. I'm going to know a lot more about the leasing process, the purchase process, the selling process than a mom and pop operator, a business owner, a small time investor. So that type of stuff, I can apply a lot of value through my experiences, by writing these books. And so that's the first piece. And then the second piece is, consistently writing. I got into the habit of writing 250 to 500 words a day. And I did that for several years. I mean, almost 5 years of just straight, writing. And a lot of the writing sucks. Like, it's not very good to start off with, but you start getting more effective through repetition. So that's, my advice. And then obviously don't edit when you write. So just write, get your word count, and then, at a later time, come back to it and edit. And if you have to scrap the rest, that's fine. That's happened to me many times where I've written something, it sucked, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm probably going to, during the editing session, I got rid of it. But, it's all about repetition. Because if you think about it, if you write 500 words a day, it takes you 100 days to write a 200-page book, a 50,000 word book. So that's the logic there.
Now, when you write, do you prefer pen, paper? Do you use a typewriter?
No, just computer. Word doc. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and again, it's all about the word count. So as soon as I hit my word count, I can feel good about just stopping. Even if I obviously I finished my train of thought, I don't want to leave something just kind of hanging. But if I'm at 525 words and it's done, I'm like, okay, that's it. And I leave it, and then I come back at a later date. If I feel like I want to write more, I'll write more. Like, no one's stopping me from writing more, but as long as I hit that word count,
what
we're
was
in good
the
shape.
hardest book for you to write?
The hardest book, probably the first one. I mean, I think it's just getting in the rhythm, right? When you're establishing any type of habit, there's this book called The Habit Loop that I read many years ago that kind of informed me on how to, structure habits. I mean, anytime you're early on in the process of executing a habit, it's going to be very awkward and very difficult. And so, getting over that hump is usually the hardest part. And once you get into a rhythm, it's like working out, right? Once you start working out at first, it really sucks. It hurts. You don't want to get up. And then all of a sudden you do it consistently over time. And now if you don't work out, it's kind of weird. You feel weird. You're like, ugh, I don't feel the same as I should. And so, it's just getting going on the first one, I think, was probably the hardest. And then, just being consistent. I think that's the biggest thing.
Awesome, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. The recommendation, man. Just get the word count in. Don't edit. Don't worry if it's crap. Just get it out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd probably need an editor or someone to kind of tune it up for me because I'm hypercritical. Yeah. Now, from an engineer background, I assume this idea of perfection and I guess perfection in systems and processes is probably pretty heavy in your mind. How do you weigh creativity with that engineer mindset? How do you balance that?
That's good. Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, I'm writing nonfiction, so I can't profess to, know like the creative process of how to formulate a fantastical story. That's not really what I've done a lot of personally. So, to that point, I don't really have an opinion. But, as far as the systemization of a process, yes, I do everything. I mean, in any business, it's important to have systems. And, for me, it was the writing in the morning. And then once the manuscript is complete, you have a process of getting it live. And so I would do the full editing. I'd contract people on Fiverr to format the book. I'd contract people on Fiverr or 99 Designs to do the cover design. Nice. Like the process is already laid out. It's in a Word doc that I can follow. And if in the future I decide to offshore that or, offload that to someone else to be able to handle that process, I can do so because it's already written out. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but yeah, I'm a big systems guy. I mean, I'm an industrial engineer by trade. Like I studied industrial engineering, which is process engineering. So that's kind of the way I operate.
Is your favorite book The Toyota Way, or those books about like?
Yeah, The Goal.
Yeah,
The Goal was a big one. It was a good book, yeah, but no, I wouldn't say that for sure. I read this book called Systemology, which is a really good book. If you ever get a chance to read it, highly encourage it. And then I read, I just do a lot of research on YouTube and such, and just kind of put stuff together as I go along.
So speaking of YouTube, you also have, 6 books under the belt, a YouTube show, a podcast show. Why did you start those? And how in the world are you creating this much content and doing this much deal flow? Like you're absolutely crushing and it seems like you're balanced. How are you doing it?
Yeah, at first it wasn't balanced. It was, and I think that's the difference. So, when I first started out, I didn't have a YouTube channel when I first got into the brokerage business. I just was kind of getting out there and trying to, generate business for myself. And then COVID hit in March of 2020. And as you guys probably all know, like we were all indoors. No one was doing any type of activity. I would reach out to business owners and they were just like, yeah, like we're not doing anything until we open back up. I mean, there's just nothing in our, there's too many unknowns. Like the market for deals was very limited because people just didn't feel comfortable making these big decisions when the whole world was shut down and we didn't know when it was actually going to open back up. And so I had a lot of time to think during that period of time. And, what I decided to do was to go digital because everyone was doing digital stuff at that point, right? All the Zoom meetings were happening and, people were online more than ever before. And so that's when I started thinking about ways I can engage people online. And that's where I started the YouTube channel. I started the virtual meetup group for commercial real estate. And then from there, I just, kept on with it, and it grew slowly but surely over time. And a lot of the videos that I had produced, like I'd, edit myself and put it out there and everything else. And so it was a very cumbersome process, but now, I've systematized everything and I have a virtual assistant that helps me out with the distribution and everything else. So all I do is record the video, upload it to the cloud. And then we have processes written out on Word documents and Loom. I don't know if you're familiar with Loom, like the video sharing software. So, or the screen sharing, I should say. So I recorded myself doing all the processes and then have the accompanying PDF to kind of support that learning. And that's what I pass along to the virtual assistant. So now she's somewhat autonomous in that regard. So all I have to do is create the content. And I don't edit a lot. So, I released one video on Monday where it's just me answering a question. I literally just throw up, the phone, and then I have this little handy dandy tripod where I put my phone on and just record it, and that's it. And I upload it, and that's done with. So my involvement as far as the content creation side is much more limited now. So I only dedicate maybe a couple hours a week to doing it.
So as you're building this out, you're starting to, crack open the network, right? You're building a deep network in Louisville, but also digital, right? YouTube, podcast, your books, your meetup group. Like, what have you found has been, if you look back since 2019 when you dove into this, what has been like the greatest moment for you where you look at it? Was it a deal size or a group size, or, what's something that you're the most proud of?
Wow, that's a pretty profound question. I'd say, one of the biggest things for me is, I think one of my natural gifts is I'm a teacher at heart. So being able to hear the value that others have received from what I'm doing is, obviously positive reinforcement to continue to do it. And, and I've definitely generated opportunities from these different mediums. Don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't say that it's going to be, going to replace my other business development efforts anytime soon. I mean, maybe down the road if I have coursework or whatever else, but if anything, what it has done is it's created a opportunity for someone, if they do search me and let's say we have an interaction in the marketplace, they know who I am, and that lowers the barrier for interacting with them the next time. And so that's where I think the biggest value that I've seen from me doing what I've been doing is that, when I have a conversation with a business owner, maybe they don't know who I am. And then after they go and search me the next time, they're like, oh, wow, like I didn't know you also had a book and all this other stuff. And, it just creates that credibility what you need when you're a service professional, right? We're here to be of service to other people, and they have to perceive the value in order for us to actually be able to work with them.
Yeah. Super cool. So love teaching, you love service, but you mentioned you're like, yes, I get some deals from it, but it's not my primary source of business development. Give us some tips on the retail side, right? Like you're out there hunting for new tenants and then new opportunities for those tenants, right? Like that's the brass tacks of what we do, right? What are some tips that you have for business development in your space?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, a big value add for the commercial real estate business is other brokers. I mean, I interact with pretty much the same brokers on a regular basis, and they represent landlords of a variety of different capacities. So anytime I get an opportunity to start working with a tenant, one of my first calls typically is to people that I think that have a presence in that area, to kind of just have that conversation to see if anything's coming available. The next step also is just outreach, in a variety of different capacities, whether that's phone, email, other digital platforms like LinkedIn. I go attend a ton of networking events. I host my own networking events. I leverage relationships that I already have by talking to them and seeing if they know of anyone who is looking for opportunities to expand or contract or whatever. And so, I don't know. There's so many different types of ways to generate business. That's just, I guess, a handful.
That's cool, man. So in your years of doing this,
Mhm.
you've done a lot of deals, but you've also, which is super impressive, like looking at some of the stats, like you guys are doing a lot of commercial real estate deals, right? And other type of deals, but super impressive. So shout out to you guys, like great job. And then on the flip side, you've accomplished more in just 3 years on the digital side and the content creation side than most people will do in their career. So really kudos to you. That's your multi-prong approach, and you're doing well. Hats off to that. I know how hard it is to have a YouTube show, to have a podcast show, to try to write a book. I'll get it out there one day, guys. I promise, right? But kudos to you to doing that. Now that you're in commercial real estate and you're building something of significance for you and your family, like what's the end goal? What are you working towards? What does significance look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's just being able to leverage the talents that I have in this world to help others, and I don't think there's an end goal in sight. I don't necessarily ever think I'll retire. I like to work. I'm somewhat of a workaholic, but not to an unhealthy degree, but I like to work, and I think people need to find things that they love to do that also can be of service to others, and if that's the case, then you're in the right area. But I would say that of significance is building something that will be able to service other people through giving them jobs and employment, and also being able to give excellent service to the clients that we ultimately decide to serve, whether that's on the brokerage end, the property management end, the development end. But really, it's going to be in the commercial real estate vertical, and it's going to incorporate both brokerage, property management, development, and passive investing opportunities for those individuals who are looking for those types of opportunities.
Super cool. And in a bit, towards the end of the interview, I'll give you an opportunity to say, hey, this is how to follow me, follow my podcast, all that stuff. I swear we'll get there, because I think it's important. People are listening in and going like, yeah, I want to learn about this. But I got some personal questions to ask you. I see in the background, I see some golf clubs and a lot of books, ton of books, but I see some golf clubs. All right. So you and I just closed a huge deal, right? An industrial park, right? You and I sell it. I bring the buyer, you have the seller, and we're going to celebrate. We're going to go golfing, right? And you get, you got this a windfall of money that comes in, and you budget it out probably because you're an engineer, but you have extra. What is something that you would do to celebrate with an extra windfall?
That's great. I mean, I think part of it is to enjoy it, right? So you'd probably incorporate some travel. I'm a big traveler. My fiance and I love to travel, so we'd probably take some form of vacation doing that. I would take another portion of that and I contribute it to causes that I believe in. Whether that's like I'm involved in several boards for charities, and I also started an organization called Engineers for Business that supports engineers who also have business aspirations, whether that's in an intrapreneur where you're inside of an organization, or an entrepreneur where you start something from scratch. So we have an organization that we started back in college to support that, and we have a scholarship that we award every year that supports that mission. So I'd say those are parts of it, and then the other part I'd invest, and put into something that I felt would be of value long term, to make sure that I'm not reliant on the massive deals to close in order for me to be able to support my family.
Yeah. What charities and what causes are important to you, and why?
That's a great question. I mean, I'll give you an overview of the ones that I'm involved with currently, so you guys can get some context. So I'm involved in Junior Achievement, which is a financial literacy organization and work readiness organization. So they go into elementary schools, high schools, and they have curriculum that they teach A lot of it has to do with financial literacy. So teaching you how to properly use money so that you can support yourself long term. Work readiness. So they'll teach you about, how to give a proper handshake, how to interview and for a potential opportunity. And then entrepreneurship, which is something that I really enjoy. So I've taught several classes, and I'm the vice chair of the Young Professional Board here. I'm involved in the Home of the Innocents, which is a phenomenal local organization that's been around for many, many, many years. I think it's 1860 or something in that range. It's been almost 150 years where they've been operational, and they support, children with disabilities, and also children that come from homes that aren't the most, the best environment for them to be in. And so, it's really just kid centric, and it's to support them getting into a better situation and also provide them with the healthcare options that they deserve. And then finally, I'm involved in, I was at SIG Ep in college, so Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity. I'm also on the board here locally for the University of Louisville. Although that was not my main chapter. I was a SIG Ep at Arizona State University. I just find it value to be able to contribute in that capacity as an alumni to the undergraduates.
That's super cool, man. I love what you're doing to invest in, invest in kids and the future of their success, right? When it comes to this training of financial literacy and entrepreneurship, like you're looking at some of this curriculum, being on the board and being on this, has there been anything as a grown adult where you look at it and you're like, holy moly, I missed that, or I didn't, like that's something that I need to implement myself?
Yeah. I mean, on the entrepreneurship side, I mean, it's an experiment, right? Like a lot of times you're just kind of shooting in the dark. And, as a kid, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just kind of messing around and trying stuff out. I would say one of the biggest things that I think all entrepreneurs should have before they start anything is there a need for it? Yeah. Because I can't tell you how many times I thought something would be a good idea. Come to realize after you invest a ton of time and energy into it, it's not really a need that people are willing to pay for. So it's one of those things where I think it is a very important exercise to perform before you start diving into these types of opportunities, just for the time saving reasons. Although you learn a lot from the experience, I would say it's also best to focus your attention on one direction that could be most fruitful. As far as financial literacy is concerned, I mean, when I was young, I mean, you go out and stuff, and I never really would think about it. I'd be like, oh yeah, Friday, Saturday, whatever, we'll go out and hang out and stuff, but you don't realize the amount of resources that you're allocating to that, when in reality it doesn't really serve the higher purpose that you're trying to achieve. So I'd say that's just part of being young and wanting to go out and do stuff. But I wish I would have thought about, okay, well, is this really the place that I should be investing these resources? So
That's so good, man. I'll tell you, in terms of like investment wise, something that I learned recently. I'm 40 years old, and my wife and I went out to dinner, and I ordered a tequila on ice, right? Milagro ice. Milagro is a decent drink. It came in, and then when I looked at the bill, it was like $38. I think they might have rung up something else, and I was just like, holy moly! I could have bought a bottle with that 1 ounce pour, or hopefully it was more than a 1 ounce pour, but it's just like how much we spend, doing these things. That same money, compounded interest 20 years later, would buy my wife probably a few more bottles, right? But it's just so interesting that when I was a kid, I wasn't thinking that, and at 40, I'm starting to. As you're teaching future generations of investors in commercial real estate, you have a commercial real estate academy now, right? As you're teaching that, what are some fundamental things that you think people should learn about commercial real estate as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from the brokerage end. I'm starting to get more on the, trying to get more on the development end on my end. But as far as the brokerage end's concerned, I mean, it's a sales role. I mean, it is a pound the pavement type of role where you have to get out there and meet a lot of people in order to generate opportunities. And, it's coming from an engineering background. That wasn't something that I had to do. I mean, you're kind of assigned a task, or, you have a problem that you're trying to solve, and you work towards solving that problem. And then there's, a paycheck that comes in every 2 weeks. Like that does not happen in the brokerage side. And it is an emotional roller coaster at times. And when things don't go the way that you hoped, you can get down. And then you also have really big highs where you get a deal done and you get the check and you're like, oh, this is great. But I think emotional regulation is very important in this profession, and it's one that I'm still dealing with on my end. Again, it is what it is. Like if you want to have the quote unquote unlimited potential of income, you also have to all have the skin, the thick skin that comes along with being in any type of sales role. So
Yeah. Ultimately, I own a brokerage, and it's a sales role. That sales machine always has to roll. And I'll tell you, I'm so glad you're talking about this, because I think as a deal maker, it's not taught in books. Here's a book, here's how to sell. Here's a book, here's how to do brokerage. Good luck. Here's a big windfall of cash. Hey, put some aside because your next deal might take a while to come through.
Oh,
right?
and taxes too.
And
People don't
taxes.
think taxes.
Ah,
That's the thing that I thank the Lord that I since the beginning I've been very deliberate about setting aside money for taxes. But I've heard stories of people that they get a big check, they spend it on something, and then all of a sudden the tax bill comes due at the end of the year, and it's like, oh wait, you mean I owe $20,000 or $30,000 to Uncle Sam? It's like, yeah, no one's withholding the taxes for you, man.
yeah. I've made that mistake. I just recently paid off my tax debt because
There you
of
go.
not at the time not
Yeah.
thinking about putting aside, and I consider myself a smart guy. I've just made a lot of mistakes.
Mhm.
And there's a rule called, I think they call it, like, it's in the book Profit First. It's the Parkinson
Mhm.
law or whatever. However much you have in that bank account, you'll wind up spending it. You spend whatever you have. And learning to put aside money and to invest money is such good. So really awesome work for putting that together in your real estate training program. Now let's do this for people who are like, hey, I want to learn real estate, commercial real estate. I want to learn investment principles. I want to read some of your books. I want to connect with this dude and do a deal. What's a good place for people to connect with you and do a deal?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'd say that's probably the best place to reach out to me. I also have my website, it's my name. So it's www.raphaelcollazo. It's COLLAZO.com. I'd say those are the two best ways to reach it. And all my contact information is on those mediums as well. So
Cool. And then for this, right? Like, I like to ask specifics. So what kind of deals, what kind of connections are you looking for or open to receiving, whether from me or my network?
absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, any type of opportunities in the retail space in this corridor region, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, open to talking about it. Also, if people are looking for JV opportunities, again, I represent a lot of tenants, on the retail end. So finding my goal with this would be to find a great building that maybe has some vacancy or is underperforming in some capacity, and then bring a tenant in tow to be able to fill that building and add value to push the actual price of the building. And so if people are open to any type of JV opportunities in that regard, happy to speak with them as well.
Cool. And tenants in tow, let's peel that back a little bit, because I
Mm-hmm.
think that's an interesting term, probably be the title of this episode. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so tenants in tow. So what that means is that, if you are a broker or an agent and you represent someone who's looking for space to lease, if you identify a building or a space that they're interested in leasing, and you then go buy the building and execute a lease with them, that is what I mean by tenant in tow. And obviously you got to make sure there's no conflict. You have to disclose all this to the tenants so that they feel comfortable with it. And if they do, then you essentially have the opportunity to buy an underperforming asset that has their value being suppressed because they're just not achieving the revenue that would justify that price. And then you buy the building, renovate it, put in the new tenant, and now the value of the building is much higher than it was before. And that's one of the safer ways, in my opinion, to invest, because you can, again, vet the tenant on the front end to make sure it's a good fit, and then you go ahead and make the deal happen.
Yeah, super awesome. Um, as you're podcasting, you've interviewed, how many episodes have you guys produced?
Yeah, we produced 82 at this point. 77 have been released.
Super cool.
So yeah, and we've interviewed people all across the nation and the world. I mean, we just interviewed someone in Peru
Yeah.
as well. So
You've done a lot of them. What has been a
mhm.
memorable moment for you? Like where you're interviewing or after the interview or something that happened, like podcasting is so fun for me. Like for you, what has been a memorable moment?
Yeah. So there's this gentleman named Michael Bull who has the America's Commercial Real Estate Show. It's one of the longest running commercial real estate podcasts out there. And I remember listening to that show when I first got started, and I got to interview him on the podcast and, talk to him. And, he obviously was a big, value add for me and how I, learned about the business. And so it was kind of cool to be able to kind of interview him and pick his brain and such. And then I come from a tech background, so I've had the opportunity to interview a lot of people in the tech space for commercial real estate. And, I just get kind of geek out about those types of opportunities coming down the pike. So,
yeah. Yeah, like if you were interviewing someone who's building a large data center or something like that, that'd probably like tune you up pretty good, wouldn't it?
oh, well, even some of the technologies, like, we had, people who've talked about like, virtual reality, artificial intelligence. We've talked about, a gentleman who, runs the biggest tech meetup or tech conference for commercial real estate, CRE Tech. So he talks about all these different types of companies that are supporting brokers, developers, even owners, as far as integration of technology within their buildings and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's great. And I think the industry itself is becoming more tech friendly, where historically we weren't very much so. But now it's becoming a lot more friendly to tech, and we're starting to see a lot more adoption in a variety of different sectors. And I'm excited for what the future holds in that space as well.
Super awesome. Behind you, here's another personal question. It could be business too. Behind you, there's a bookcase full of books. All right. So have you seen the movie Men in Black?
Yes.
Okay. So I hold up the one, erase your memory. Boom. All your memory of any book you've ever read on that bookshelf is erased. And you could go back and choose one book to refresh your memory or to relearn something. You could choose one in business, one in personal if you want, but what would you choose?
So The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy is the one that I read that changed my life. And I was 23 years old, I think, when I read it. Essentially, the basis of the book is small, consistent action taken in a positive direction, and you expand it over time, adds up to huge results. So the same type of logic that I apply to writing a book, write 500 words a day, extrapolate that over 100 days, which is just over 3 months, you got a 200-page book. You talk to 5 people a day over the course of a year. That's 1,500 connections. What does that mean for your business? So like it doesn't happen. It's not you don't eat an elephant in one bite. It's the daily habits you take that add up to where you want to be in life. And they could be in a positive direction or they could be in a negative direction, because the same applies. If you drink 3 Cokes a day over the course of a year, that's over 1,000 Cokes. Like that's not a positive direction. You're not going in a positive direction in that regard. So.
Yeah, that's super awesome, man. So, what we could do is, and maybe you could do this, is maybe share some of the charities that you're involved in, maybe a link. So if someone's listening in and they want to go, hey, I want to help support a mission that's important to you, they could click and donate or volunteer or something like that. So fellow deal makers, as always, thanks for listening into this podcast interview. Reach out to our guests directly. Do a deal with them. The purpose and mission of the show is to connect deals and deal makers. So if you hear someone and you're learning something about a deal and you want to connect with them, their information's in the show notes. Or you can reach out to me and say, hey, connect me with Raphael, right? So one more thing, Raphael. Is there any – I should ask you 2 more questions. What's your favorite Ninja Turtle, right? Is it Raphael?
I think that's a safe bet, I'd say.
Safe bet.
It's Raphael. Yeah.
Cool. And then second question, are there any other questions that I should have asked you during this interview that I completely screwed up and did not ask you?
No, man, I think it was pretty comprehensive, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to connecting with your network, because you've seemed to build a pretty solid one, so excited to engage.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you. Fellow deal makers, as always, head on over to thedealscout.com. Fill out a quick form if you want to be on the show to talk about your deal. And as always, if there's a deal that you need some help with or you'd like to go on the hunt with the deal with us, thedealscout.com, there's a form at the top. Fill it out, and our team will get a hold of you. So till then, we'll talk to you all on the next episode. See you guys.